Alright, we are back with another video. A really early video because I just got fired from my job and I need to finally try to get paid on YouTube. So I'm going to try to get out as many videos as possible, so expect a lot of them. Originally I was going to do a pro wrestling what if, but unfortunately I've been feeling a little bit burnt out on pro wrestling. So yep, no pro wrestling what if for me, unfortunately. But anyway, I will do a JoJo what if instead because I have a lot of fun with them. Plus, I was going to do a JoJo what if straight after the pro wrestling what if anyway, so not like anything would have changed. I'll probably do another JoJo what if again, so yeah, you're getting some back-to-back JoJo what ifs. Anyway, today's what if is what would happen if the Pillarmen never awoken back in Battle Tendency. That is my big what if return. And it sounds like a cool what if to a big return on because the Pillarmen are very important to the events of Part 2, and could debatably affect the events of the future parts. So, how would it change? Well, here's my take on how I think the story would change without the Pillarmen awakening in Part 2. So, buckle up and enjoy the adventure. But, before I end up doing that, I gotta thank someone. Thank you to, Real Team Wall for requesting this what if. So, thank you for that person for requesting this what if, because this was a video request. Hope I do your video justice, and I hope you do enjoy the video. Anyway, I'm going to stop chit-chatting, because I'm pretty sure everyone just wants to hear the story and how it plays out. So let's do it. How does Part 2 through 6 change? Alright, so starting off with Battle Tendency, of course. How does the events change? Well, in my honest opinion, Strazo would actually have to destroy Santana to have this happen. So after he knocks out Speedwagon and takes the Stone Mask for himself, he destroys Santana, meaning that there's no way the Pillarmen can ever awaken. So he runs away, he goes to fight Joseph like he canonically does, and of course Joseph still wins this fight. Now of course this means Joseph would have to go against the German soldier to save Speedwagon. I'm not going to use the original name because I'm trying to get monetized soon and trying to make money on YouTube. But anyway, in this fight, I feel like Joseph could just win pretty easily, and he'd just kill Stroheim along with the rest of the you-know-who's, because they're evil, and Joseph would want to do something like that. So, yeah, Joseph would probably kill them straight after defeating them, and he saves Speedwagon, and that's it for Battle Tendency. Now, as for what other characters, I guess, do going forward, Caesar would still be alive. That's one big change, and that means Caesar would continue his hormone training and would more or less just be able to, I guess, reunite with Joseph in the future. Joseph in this timeline never meets Caesar, but they would eventually meet probably years later, likely in the 80s because of, the Dio stuff that happens. But regarding other characters in Battle Tendency, Smokey's more or less going to do the same thing he did in the canon. Joseph more or less just lives a lot quieter of a life earlier on in his life, so he probably just gets to at least relax earlier. He eventually still has a child. He'll eventually still have Holly, but with a different woman, since he'll never meet CZQ. Caesar could end up being the one who marries CZQ instead, and of course he goes on to have his son Gaius, who I've made up as an OC, which leads to the other kids, Julius and Rose. So yeah, spoiler for anyone who's not used to my content, get used to seeing a lot of OCs. After Julius and Rose would exist, that more or less just leads to Caesar continuing his family, and since Mark could still be alive because there's no Pillarmen, Mark would end up marrying his wife, and this could possibly lead to Marcia existing and then the Gutenberg family from my Mark what if. Since I don't really have much to do with the Gutenberg family, I might just throw them in just for fun. If you don't want me to include them, like if you want me to do a timeline of the comics or a remake of this video where Mark and his family don't get involved, then I'm willing to do that, but I don't think too much would change at the timeline. So I'm just going to throw the Gutenberg family and Mark into this part because that just sounds fun. Other Part 2 changes are that Stroheim is gone, so even if he was... So with Stroheim gone, that means no Dominic and Nico. So those would be the only OCs we're going to be missing out on from my huge Part 3 OCs. We'll exclude in the Dio relatives, but from the Part 3 half, only the Gutenberg family and the Zeppeli family OCs would exist. No Stroheim OCs in this timeline, unfortunately, so, yeah. Lisa would never get to meet Joseph, and Lisa would probably just continue training on Hamon, and she would never meet Joseph again, probably living her own life. As for other, I guess, big changes to come out of it, I can't really think of any other changes right now. Uh, Maybe in this timeline we get more survivors. I mean, not really survivors, but I guess when it comes down to it, I can't really think of anything else. That's honestly all the real changes I can think of. I feel like a lot of the other Part 2 survivors would just go on to mostly just live similar lives to they do in the canon. It's just that these characters would change, and that's kind of all I can see for Battle Tendency. I'm going to move on to Stardust Crusaders now because I don't really have anything else to add in for Part 2. Alright, so now we're in Stardust Crusaders. How does this change? Well, obviously this means we have, obviously the OG 6 characters, Joseph, Jotaro, Polnareff, Kakyoin, Avdol, and Iggy, and also we have extra characters, Caesar, Julius, and Rose from iZeppeli stuff, and obviously Mark and Marcia, Hedwig, and Manfred. So that gives us from a boost of 6 characters to now a whopping crew of 13. Also 14 because I actually think Whole Horse would join because Marcia being on the team could lead him being the nicest man, his whole shtick there. So Whole Horse can join the crew, and that would be cool to see. As for, I guess, other changes on, I guess, who could also be part in this timeline, that's all I could really see. Caesar would continue his hormone training. Mark would probably just not be able to do much in general in this timeline. Though granted he'd be part of the Gutenberg family, he would probably have a stand granted, but he probably wouldn't really have much of an ability to fight, unfortunately. This isn't like my other Mark What If, where he's a cyborg, meaning that Mark is able to, do a bunch of stuff here. He's a lot weaker. He's an old man by this point, so he's not doing too much. He might even just sit out the adventure in general, but I don't think he would. I'll just drag him along just because. And Joseph would also not continue his hormone training since him and Caesar never really get to meet, meaning Joseph just doesn't have that motivation to continue training, so it's basically just Stardust Crusaders Joseph in Stardust Crusaders. Unfortunately, not a aged down Joseph. We get to see in my other What Ifs where him and Caesar together, but that's because him and Caesar's friendship really never happens in this timeline. So in this timeline, Joseph would actually not really have much of a friendship with Caesar in this timeline. Now, when it comes to other changes in Part 3 and how that would change, I don't think too much would realistically change. Like, obviously, fights would probably go on quicker because you have 14 characters on the Stardust Crusaders in this timeline. But I don't really think too much is going to change for most of the story, and I'm not going to go through every fight. If you want me to do it in the comments, of course I will, but I'm not going to do it here right now. If you want me to go through every fight from like parts 4, 5, and 6 as well, along with the part 3 fights, I'm willing to do that in the comment section, but I'm not going to do that right now. I can do that in the comments. But regarding part 3 though, I feel like too much realistically wouldn't change the big stuff. Like, Avdol still dies to Whole Horse and J-Guile, and Kakyoin obviously still gets his eye injury from Nodal. And of course we still get other characters joining the crew, like Iggy joins during the Nodal fight. Kakyoin and Polnareff get their flesh bugs removed from Jotaro in the beginning, and Avdol is still sent with Joseph. Now, when it comes to the ending of the story, the big separation from younger Darby to get stuck in his gaming dungeon, I'm just going to say Julius, Rose, Marcia, and Manfred can be in the gaming dungeon, and obviously Mark, Caesar, Hedwig can stay with Avdol, and also Whole Horse can stay with Avdol, Iggy, and Polnareff. In my opinion, Mark's going to be the one who dies to Vanilla Ice. I don't know if he'd have enough ability or strength to push everyone out of the way from Cream, so that would be really hard to do, but let's assume maybe Mark can use a stand while at it to aid him, and Mark gets killed by Vanilla Ice, saving the others, giving him a sacrifice. Now, with extra characters like Avdol, Caesar, and Whole Horse, and Manfred around, I think the fight would actually just speed up a lot quicker, along with Polnareff not getting injured, and Iggy also not dying. So those characters would still very much be alive. Now, as for how this would affect the Dio fight with extra characters, I think Caesar and Joseph would go together, and Caesar would be the one who dies to reveal the world's power instead of Kakyoin. So Caesar would do the big sacrifice, and he would fight off Dio, and he would die in the process. This gives Caesar a sacrifice of his own, and Joseph would end up being depressed and would go on to fight Dio. He still gets killed the same way. Of course, he gets resurrected straight after. And everything in part 3 kind of just goes the same. We just get a lot more survivors in this timeline, and Mark and Caesar are the only deaths in this timeline. Everyone else is still alive in this timeline. We just get only Mark and Caesar dying. So those are our only deaths. Everyone else, Joseph, Jotaro, Abdul, Iggy, Polnareff, Kakyoin, Manfred, Hedwig, Marcia, Julius, and Rose, and Whole Horse, of course, would go on and survive the part. And that would kind of just be it for part 3. Now, moving into part 4, this is kind of like my Caesar what ifs, where it's Caesar and where it's obviously Kakyoin and Rose around. Whole Horse and Abdul, of course, in the timelines where they do get to survive. And obviously, maybe the Gutenberg family, depending if they're not in Italy. It generally just depends if they're either helping Polnareff in Italy or they're helping out in Morio. But a change here that's normally different from all these timelines that include like Rose, Abdul, Whole Horse, and Kakyoin is that Joseph is going to be doing nothing because without Hollow training, Joseph will unfortunately become senile. So he's still the senile old man from Diamond is Unbreakable. So Joseph is unfortunately not going to be doing too much in this timeline. As for how this would affect the events of Diamond is Unbreakable, I can't. Obviously, with extra characters, Joseph in the canon did nothing in Diamond is Unbreakable, and regardless of what happens here, his storyline just doesn't affect the plot. Kakyoin, Abdul, Whole Horse, and Rose, however, would affect the plot in their own unique ways. And also, if the Gutenberg family are around, of course, they'll have some kind of effect on the events of the part as well. I don't really see this affecting who lives and dies, though. I still think we have all of our canon deaths, such as Keicho, Aya, and Shigechi. All those characters are still going to die, in my opinion. And obviously, I feel like with extra characters, that could affect some fights, like the Red Hot Chili Pepper and Sheer Heart Attack, and of course, the final fight. I'm not going to go through every Diamond is Unbreakable fight. Like I said, if you want to hear all the fights from parts 3, 4, 5, and 6 in the comments, I'll gladly tell you them, but I'm just going to more or less give you, I guess, a brief summary of, I guess, the characters' roles. I think they all would play as good mentors, in my opinion. Kakyoin could show up with Jotaro in the beginning. Abdul can show up during the Red Hot Chili Pepper arc. And I also think Whole Horse could also show up there, along with Rose, who could show up after Akira's defeat. And if the Gutenberg family do show up, I think they'd show up around the Red Hot Chili Pepper arc as well. So we get most of the characters for the Red Hot Chili Pepper arc, and we basically just kind of get Kakyoin for the very beginning. As for how I think the story would change, I don't really see anyone dying. Possibly Marcia or Hedwig could die. I think Manfred survives. But Marcia or Hedwig could possibly die in part 4 or 5. Or maybe even 6, but I think they might just be too old to really show up for those parts because they'd be in their 70s. But I don't really think there's too much to change here. And I think part 4 would more or less kind of just go the same regardless, except with extra characters around, which could speed up the story a little bit. Now we are on part 5, and in this timeline, Abdul would be the one sent the mission, and I actually think he would bring Josuke, Okuyasu, Rohan, and Koichi with him, as they would be good extra backup to help Abdul out. Obviously, if that's the case, then of course we'll meet Fredo in the story, like we do in most of my timelines. Of course, Giorno's still doing his shtick, and of course part 5 kind of just begins the same way as it canonically does. Giorno scams Koichi along with Rohan, probably. And he, of course, meets Bruno, so Giorno's story just kind of goes the same until the Black Sabbath fight, which he'll have extra help because, of course, there's Rohan, there's Josuke, there's Okuyasu, and there's Abdul. Fredo is also forced to join the crew after he tries to escape, but he gets caught. So in this timeline, as for how I think this would affect the events of the story, I'm not going to go through every fight, like I've said. If you want me to go through every fight for part 5 as well, along with the other parts, I'm willing to do that. But when it comes to the big changes, Bruno's death, where he gets killed and gets resurrected by Giorno, that of course still happens like it canonically does, so nothing really to change here. Fugo also ends up not leaving in this timeline, since I think Abdul can tell him about how he ran away from Dio, and then he came back and helped to defeat Dio. So Fugo can actually go on the boat in this timeline, maybe getting some kind of confidence from Avdol's story. As for other characters who originally lived and died in this timeline, Abakio I would probably still kill off, but Avdol is Frodo's fault, and this could be something that could lead to his character development. For Chocolate and Sekko, I think Frodo and Avdol can help against Sekko, and Fugo can help out against Chocolate. Or Frodo could help out against Chocolate as well, and have just Avdol and Bruno work together against Sekko instead. Which I think that might also be a good idea. Maybe an extra character so that the Morio crew can go against a member of the Chocolate and Sekko group. I don't know. Part 5 mostly kind of goes the same for the final fight. But in this timeline, Polnareff would have Julius and Iggy, and possibly the Gutenberg family. Avdol would end up taking the spot of getting killed and becoming Coco Jumbo, in my opinion. So he takes Polnareff's place. And I feel like this would lead to the body swap being mostly the same with, like, the canon cast. Like, you know, Bruno with Diavolo, and then Diavolo's obviously going to be stuck in Mista's body. So Bruno and Doppio basically switch. Giorno and Rancia switch, and Mista and Trish switch, like they canonically do. But Polnareff, I think, would switch bodies with Julius. Iggy would switch bodies with a random cat. And the other body swaps would include, basically some of the canon characters, like, Josuke and Rohan could switch, because that would be pretty funny. Okuyasu could switch with Fugo, I guess, and Koichi and Frodo could switch. If the Gutenberg family is around, then I think most of them would just end up switching with each other, and then the other one could switch with Iggy, probably. That's how I could see it going. Or if it's just one of them, then Iggy and that member of the family switch. I could, if there's any extra Gutenberg family members still around, like maybe Manfred or I think Hedwig or Marcia, I could see one of those two probably dying in part 5, or possibly both of them. Manfred, I think, might survive, but barely. Iggy would die saving Narantia, so that's just my take. Narantia would survive because Iggy would use a Sandcloud to trick out Diavolo, but Diavolo would kill Iggy straight after because of the Sandcloud trick. So Iggy would die in Golden Wind, and he would do a sacrifice to save Narantia. I don't think too much of Part 5 would realistically change. There's my I think Bruno would still go on to just die and stop not Chariot Requiem, but Magician's Red Requiem, or Magician's Red Quiem. I hate that joke. Giorno still gets GER, of course, and he puts Devil in the death loop like he originally does. There's really nothing else I can honestly add for Part 5. I just think everything goes the same there. So, yeah. Part 5 ends the same. Nothing I could really think of to include in Part 5. And that's kind of all I would include here, this timeline. Well, I mean, obviously the only rule change is that we have more extra survivors, but, yeah, whatever. Alright, so now on Stone Ocean, the part more or less just starts out the same as it originally does. So, Jolene still gets arrested like she canonically does and gets framed. Jotaro still ends up going to Florida to try to save Jolene and bust her out of the prison. That fails and Pucci takes his disc. Alright, so, yeah. Basic changes there. Obviously, Tenmei still gets forced to go, because we're going by my logic. Tenmei, Kakyoin and Rose would have Tenmei, their son, and obviously that means Josuke, Okuyasu, Koichi, and Rohan come along. And since Joseph doesn't continue his Hanma training in this timeline, there's no Joseph in this timeline, unfortunately. But maybe Michael and what was his name? Valentino would be in this timeline. Valentino because he's Manfred's son, and Michael, who's Polnareff's son, who could be here because maybe Polnareff decides to have kids because more of his JoBro friends would have kids. As for other changes in the events of the story, I think Coal Horse would come along, and I also could see more of the Crusaders helping out as well. As for the events of Stone Ocean, like, I guess each fight and all that, when it comes to each fight and how I think it would change, I think when it comes to, I'm not going through each fight by fight. If you want me to for Stone Ocean, I will. when it comes to the main changes, I feel like Hermes would not get injured from the Sports Max fight in this timeline because Josuke would heal her injury up straight after. So Hermes would not get injured or sidelined for the entire Sports Max arc or the entire Punishment Ward arc. Granted, Weather Report's still going to be sidelined, but Hermes is not sidelined in this timeline. Sidelined in this timeline. Kind of rhymes. Hermes would die in the Punishment Ward arc, so she would die so FF can live. And also, Okuyasu and Koichi can help out FF so they don't have to lose Atro's body. So FF would survive in this timeline. As for other changes, I can't really think of anything else for the Punishment Ward. I think everyone else who originally lives and dies in this arc just goes the same. I don't see anyone else dying except for Hermes. And when it comes to the Dio Sons arc, since I feel like that sounds like important enough to talk about, I'll say that Koichi, Okuyasu, and Rohan, and Manfred, not Manfred, but Valentino, Michael, and what was his name? Manfred, Whole Horse 2. Manfred and Palmer if they tag along as well, along with Julius if they like tag along in like the beginning or something. I think those people can be in the Bohemian Rhapsody fight. If Taijana exists in this timeline, she can help out with Jolene and Emporio, along with FF, Tinmei, and Josuke, and they're going to help out against Rikil and Donatello. For Bohemian Rhapsody, I feel like this fight just mostly goes the same, regardless of the extra characters, because Unglo was in an airplane for most of the arc, so I think that fight just goes the same. Maybe they could beat him faster, but I doubt it. I just think that fight goes the same regardless, because everyone was mostly just split up. When it comes to the fight with Rikil, I feel like Rikil's fight would mostly go the same, maybe a bit quicker, but however, after his fight ends, I actually think Josuke would heal him. Since Hermes isn't around to just kill him straight after, I actually think the group would see potential in Rikil as an ally, and Rikil would turn good and join the Stone Ocean gang straight after. So Rikil does get his chance to redeem himself and become a good guy. Now, excuse me, sorry for the burp. When it comes to the Donatello fight, I don't think too much is honestly going to change here. But however, in this timeline, Donatello would still use Heavy Weather, or the Weather Report memory disk, to create Heavy Weather. So Weather Report still becomes a villain for a bit. We still get Weather Report versus Pucci. And despite all the extra help, I still think Pucci's going to unfortunately kill Weather Report in this timeline. So yeah, Weather Report would still die in this timeline. And yeah, that would probably just go on the same with him. Now, when it comes to the rest of the events of Stone Ocean, I don't think too much would honestly change, but with extra characters around, I do think that Okuyasu and Whole Horse would both die to Sea Moon. I think Okuyasu could save Koichi, so that Koichi could awaken Echoes Act 4 in the story, and Whole Horse would die against Sea Moon as well, getting his own proper fight. So Okuyasu and Whole Horse die to Sea Moon, and I think the rest of the story just kind of goes the same, with Jotaro along with Kakyoin and Rose and any other remaining Crusaders that are still alive. They show up and they stop Pucci from shooting Jolene. Now when it comes to Made in Heaven, I think the beginning half would have Rikil fight off Pucci. He gets hurt and he either dies from his wounds, or alternatively, maybe with extra characters around, they can find someone to treat his wounds. Maybe FF and Rose work together to treat his wounds, since I think Rikil would be too far from Josuke to heal him. I don't know. Either Rikil dies in this timeline, or he survives. I'll kind of leave that up to you. I might prefer him as a survivor, but if you think he should die, then I don't know. That's up to you. That's your story. When it comes to the events, the rest of the events of Stone Ocean, I don't think too much would change until the group get knocked into the ocean, and Anasui would still get Donut, but he would survive because Josuke can use Crazy Diamond to heal him. And since Crazy Diamond's able to heal him, Anasui's still able to use Diver Down to tank the hits for Jotaro. So Jotaro does survive getting chopped through the face. But unfortunately, I still think Jotaro will end up dying, or possibly Josuke could die and Jotaro can live. Since there's no Joseph here to just sacrifice himself for Jotaro to get his last time stop in, I either think Jotaro is going to die against Made in Heaven and would just injure and would try to use the last bit of his time stop to hurt Pucci, or Josuke could sacrifice himself for Jotaro to get his last time stop. Granted, you could do someone else if you want. Another return character could work, but I'm leaning more toward Jotaro or Josuke for this, to kind of hit that big Joestar death. So, yeah. One of those two die in Stone Ocean, and that's all I could really say there. I don't really have much else to add. Those would be the only main debts I can see. And yeah, that would be it. I don't really have other things to add in this timeline. Hopefully you guys enjoy this video, and it was actually a very interesting what if to make. So also, thanks especially to Real Team Wall, and a special thanks to everyone who enjoyed this video. I'm glad to be back. Hopefully this video does really well, and I hope it gets to a point where I start getting paid on YouTube soon, so I don't have to go back to working a crappy job again. Hopefully I get paid on YouTube, and hopefully I can open up a Patreon one day, and hopefully I don't have to work another office job. And I'm going to try my best to honestly go on and just try my best to post more on YouTube. Even with the burnout, I'll just force myself to do it. Because I'm going to try to get paid, honestly. I'm going to try to get my channel monetized soon enough. And I have a lot of goals in my life right now. This is a goal right now, to try to get monetized on YouTube. It's going to be one of my goals now. So, going forward, I'm going to try my best to do a lot more when it comes to a lot of things. And yeah, if there's any sponsors that want me to sponsor your product, I can try. Granted, I'm not going to try to get scammed or anything, but I'm willing to get a sponsor. I'll have to look for a way to get sponsors granted, but hey, you know what? Screw it, I'm willing to do it. If you want me to sponsor your thing, I'm willing to do it. Thanks for everyone who enjoyed this video. Thank you for that, and I don't really have much else to say, but yeah. Thanks for watching the video, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will hopefully be probably soon, but yeah. Anyway, see ya, and goodbye.